So let's get started. The first law. What's the first law that we discussed last time? Was the law of free will. So let's write the laws up one at a time. So the law of free will is, again, I'm allowed to do anything I want, whether what I want to do is actually harmonious with love and actually building up other people, or if it's disharmonious with love and even destroying other people. I'm allowed to do whatever I want. So this is a primary law that God gave us, the gift of free will that God gave to every single person in the entire universe, not just to people on this earth. So how does that affect our love of self? So let's look at how this law affects my love of myself. Well, if I am in a state where I respect the law of free will within myself, every single time another person tries to get me to do what they want to do, and I don't want to do it, I would respect the fact that I don't want to do it. So mum comes home from a hard day's work and the family wants her to cook a meal. She doesn't want to cook a meal, but she does it anyway because she feels like she has to and she's the only one who can cook good in the family, right? She's just broken the law of free will towards herself. Does that make sense? Just by doing that one thing. Now, people would justify that and say, and I'm just going to turn down the mic a little bit. People would justify that and say, that's a loving thing to do. But remember we said right at the beginning, if I'm sacrificing myself in order to love another, I am not loving to myself or the other. Remember I said that? Right at the beginning. So, in this case, if the woman comes home and she doesn't want to make it, she doesn't have to be any reason for it. It might be that she is tired, or it might be that she feels something else, but she doesn't even have to have a single reason to do this. She can just say, I don't want to make a meal tonight, and everyone in the family, if they projected at her anger for not making a meal for them that night, they are also out of harmony with the law of free will. But you see, when we're on the receiving end of other people's anger, what do we normally try to do? We try to appease them. We try to make them feel better, right? So anger is actually a way that people use to control us. Can you see that? If I'm angry at somebody, I am actually wanting to control that person. I want them to do whatever I expect. So the instant that another person, so myself, let's say as myself, I decide I don't want to cook a meal tonight. Of course, according to God's other laws, that would also mean that I don't probably want to eat the meal tonight. And if I expected somebody else to cook for me, that would also be unloving, wouldn't it? So if I was the woman coming home from work and I say, I don't want to cook a meal tonight, so I don't cook a meal, and nobody else cooks a meal for me and I get angry, then now I'm out of harmony with the law of free will. Can you see that? But if I'm feeling free will as a paramount law within my love of myself, what that will mean then is that I feel allowed to do whatever I wish. Now, most people around you do not let you do whatever you wish. In fact, most of us were taught from at a very young age that we're not allowed to do whatever we wish. In fact, not only are we not allowed, it's not practical, you can't live that way, it's selfish, and we get all of these other emotions pummeled into us from a very young age about actually doing what you are allowed to do. But from God's perspective, God never does that. So God never is going to punish you in the future for anything you chose to do. Nothing is a punishment. That doesn't mean, remember from our introductory session, that there isn't consequences, because there are certainly consequences when we break different laws, including the law of free will. The consequence if I break the law of free will towards myself is that I will feel the pain of devaluing myself in all of my relationships. Now remember that all of our discussion today is not about using your intellect to get out of the situation. The intellect you can certainly use if you want to actually act more loving to yourself. So in other words, every single time a decision comes to you, you could say, oh, is this in harmony with free will or is this not in harmony with free will? Now, every time you made a decision, that would be pretty complex, wouldn't it? Like, particularly considering how many decisions you make in a day, having to ask that question on every single decision. Like, should I go Sandgate Road or should I go, is this harmony with my free will? Like, you know what I mean? You start getting very complicated things going on when you start asking yourself these questions at an intellectual level. What I am saying is that every single thing that you do is a choice and you're allowed to make any choice you want. However, if you really want to deal with this bringing your soul in harmony with free will, if you're following the divine path, what you would do is you would look at all of the emotions that you have inside of yourself that cause you to not follow your free will. Does that make sense? And you would also look at all of the desires that you have or passions that you have inside of yourself that cause you to actually use your free will in a way that damages another person's free will. Can you see what's going on there? So on one hand, what I would do, I would not start looking at this from an intellectual point of view. What I need to do is allow myself to settle into the emotions. Right? So every time I feel like I'm being controlled by another person, I am out of harmony with the law of free will. I am out of harmony with the law of free will. So I'll say that again. Every time I feel like another person is controlling me, I am out of harmony with the law of free will. There's an emotional belief in me that I've got to do what they are attempting to control me to do. And I'm reacting to that emotion. And what I need to do if I want to really be closer to God is release that emotion. So the emotion might be this emotion that if I don't do what they want, they won't love me, and I'm avoiding the feeling of being not loved. That might be the emotion. And all I really need to do is feel the feeling of nobody loves me and release that and experience that and release that emotionally, and all of a sudden I am now automatically not listening to a person who's trying to control me. So you see, a person can try to control you, but if you are uncontrollable, then it doesn't affect you, does it? And really the law of free will is that you are uncontrollable. That's the law of free will, isn't it, in the end? The law of free will is I'm allowed to do anything I want. Doesn't that make you uncontrollable? Totally. Right? So you're allowed to be uncontrollable. Of course, every time you're uncontrollable in an unloving way, there's a consequence from one of God's laws, which will help correct you. But every time you're uncontrollable in a loving way, what will happen is you have more joy and more satisfaction and more beautiful things happening in your life. So this is why we need to be uncontrollable more of the time. Now, what has the world taught us to do with the law of free will? The world has taught us that we've got to suppress our desires and passions, even if they are loving. And the world has also taught us that if we have emotions that actually cause us to not value our own free will, we've got to fight for ourselves. And so what do we end up doing in that situation? What we finish up doing is we're in a situation, somebody's trying to control us, and instead of feeling like, he can't control me, I'm fine, we feel like, that person's trying to control me, you really want to start getting angry with them and control them back, and sometimes we may even get violent with them, like to try to prevent them from controlling me. Either way, I'm breaking the law of free will in my treatment, firstly of myself and then of others.